Zdravím Vědátoři na AFO. Tentokrát máme hosta z ciziny, Joshuou Rood, a budeme se teda switchovat kvůli tomu do angličtiny. Hi, I'm Ladislav and we are from the page Vědátor. It's like science guy, something.
Science guy.
Yeah, pretty much. And you're an ethnologist and folklorist.
Kind of, yeah.
Kind of. So what is your field is studying northern religion and myths?
Yeah, Old Norse religion, technically. So religious historian of religion.
Why is it important to study old religion in general and northern religions? For today's world, today's perspective.
For today's world, I think it's very important because even though these are past religions, they're playing a modern role. Aside from the fact that Old Norse religion and old pagan religions are making revivals today, even if we set that aside, with today's socio-political kind of environment, people are looking to the past, they're drawing on past mythology, they're drawing on writings of the past, and it is very important, I think, to be able to have people who can contextualize it and explain why people are looking to the past, put it into a kind of perspective.
And why people are looking to the past from your experience?
That's part of why, and that's part of why it takes people to spend years researching it.
Yeah, so make it like 2-minute answer.
Yeah. There's a lot into it. I mean, we could talk about disenchantment and how in the Western world, for the first time in history, with the large Christianity and the large demarcators of identity, those have fallen a bit to the side, and people are finding themselves in positions where they can they're free to look and shop around for an identity, an ideology, and so people are looking to the past. It's
some
a
people
natural place to
look for northern religions, or
they look to Greek religion. They look to, if it's an old mystical way of connecting to the world, you can be sure there are people looking at it. And Norse religion is one of the big ones right now because of things like the Vikings. Vikings are cool right now.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
How do you think northern religion is reflected in today's pop culture, like Vikings, Marvel Cinematic Universe, perhaps Stargate TV show?
Stargate, yeah. They take on, the Old Norse religion takes on, you've got this pile of stuff called Old Norse religion. And people are drawing on it and putting into all kinds of different kind of universes. You know, you have the Stargate universe where they're aliens, and you've got the Marvel Thor where I don't really follow it. I think they're not.
Yeah, like aliens as well.
Yeah. And then you have the Vikings kind of TV show and its kind of universe, and you've got even Tolkien and Lord of the Rings is heavily inspired by pulling from Norse myth. So it's a body of myth that people can tap into and kind of recreate in various new forms.
And if you see like the modern representation in these fictional works, like in this sci-fi or other genres, how do they translate the old religion?
Do they do a faithful translation of it?
Perhaps not obviously, but how what they borrow that matters in the old religion, in these old myths, and what do they omit?
The myths that we have, the Norse myths, they were written down hundreds of years after conversion. They don't really reflect religious belief. They reflect they're myths, and in many ways they were written down as stories. In today's world, we find them kind of even more as stories. So Thor, who once may have been a god, a deity viewed as like a purifying, healing deity that would drive away disease and pestilence and keep crops growing, By the time it's written down, he's a red-haired guy with a hammer.
Yeah.
By the time it gets transcribed even further into Marvel Thor, he's a superhero.
Yeah.
And so I would say that in today's culture, they're removed, more and more removed from the kind of everyday
essence.
Yeah, the essence of the religious practices, the way that people related to kind of animistic, divine way of looking at the world, and seeing spirits in the waterfalls and in the land and in the trees. You don't see that anymore. Now you see superheroes almost, characters with stories,
action stuff.
Yeah, you have a narrative leading up to Ragnarok, whether or not people, they don't really reflect the living reality that people during the Viking Age would have had. So I think they've become, in pop culture, increasingly fictionalized. So that's how I would describe it.
How do you study? You mentioned that there was a shift from the, let's say, original period, then the myth was written down 100 years ago, perhaps, and now it's perceived as well in a different light.
Yeah.
How do you study this shift? What is your trust in the sources, and how do you translate it in the research?
It's a lot of what is the word? Interdisciplinary approaches. So, in the last 30 years, with for various technological reasons, archaeology has increasingly played a bigger part. So, we can now, for the first time, look at the archaeological history of a location and see the religious patterns and how they've shifted and changed. And we can look then at the written sources and see how they correlate. And then you can look at neighboring countries and neighboring religious systems, for example, among the Sami and the Finno-Ugric people and the Baltic countries. And you have to take all of this information, mix it together, and start drawing theories, essentially. And there are a lot of it is guesswork, and a lot of it is, there's a lot that we can say about the Viking Age, and there's a lot that is left for theorizing.
Yeah. So there's definitely room to research more.
Yeah, and we will never know exactly. We will never be able to get to the
problem studying history.
Exactly.
You can't get the exact answer.
Exactly, and even if you can rest assured that in one place they did it this way, and in another place they did it in another way. So, the importance, I think, is looking at what's relevant the most is being able to understand what we do know about the past and how people are using that past, and being able to point at the various uses people are drawing from it, and what political and social purposes and entertainment purposes are going into that.
What do you think is the biggest misconception about the northern myths and religion in today's world, whether it's pop culture or other use?
That the Scandinavian people before Christianity were Vikings. Yeah. That's the biggest one. Viking in the original or in the old Nordic sense is really just the Nordic word for to be a pirate. Yeah. And there are pirates in all societies. Not everybody was a pirate and not everybody was a warrior. It was not any more of a warrior society than anywhere else. But that's the perception that people have. That Scandinavia was a land of warriors that are going to go to Valhalla, and a very, very small group of people that thought that way.
But they had success in history and way.
Kind of.
They exported their culture and populations elsewhere.
But people migrated from Northern Europe down into Southern Europe before that. People migrating, going from one place to another. Success, or is it, are you leaving because you're
under them? So must have been something that touched people's attention.
Well, and that's maybe the legacy. Is that things were written down and it grabbed. We have this body of myths and this body of sagas, and they've become legends, and legends have a life of their own. So, in that way, there is a success.
And if I turn it around, what do you think is one thing that people don't know about Northern myths or context, but they definitely should?
Ooh. They weren't one people. We think of Scandinavia as being one people, but in the context of that time, there were lots of different religions, lots of different groups of people, lots of different what we would say ethnicities. We like to think of them all as one Nordic people. They weren't. There were lots of different kinds of people with lots of different religions. And the only reason that we think of them that way is because after the fact, things are written about one narrative. And all the other narratives that weren't written are missing. So I think that's what people need to realize, is that it was a very diverse group of people.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for your time.